every year.
There's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts.
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
They should not bother us.
Democracy. All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
Always support strength,
Constant freedom.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and yearn.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. If you're or even if you're a new one and you're Christian, I want to wish you a happy, I think it's Ascension Day in English. If you're part of the LGBTQ AIOC movement, I want to wish you a happy Eurovision Song Contest Day. But today we might actually talk a bit about Eurovision today, but we're going to talk a bit about something else as well. With me, of course, I have Ludwig Path, as always.
Thank you very much. I mean, there are many days that have been happening in the last week. If you're a Norwegian listener, then happy Liberation Day. It's not the national holiday, but it's
pretty close.
8th. That was yesterday. That was sort of the end of Nazi occupation celebration. And there's been Putin's inauguration. So if you're a C-tard, then we salute. Dissident Nomad. Sorry, it's just Nomad now. How are you doing?
Hello. Yes, good to be here. Yeah, the name change it's been Nomad for a while now. I'm thinking all year. I'm not sure, but people still
has
call
been
me
for a while,
Dissident
yeah.
Nomad because my Substack is still
The
quite-
link is still Dissident Nomad. That's true. Speaking of, the link to your Substack, the link to Nomad's Twitter should both be in the description. If you're not aware of him, I highly recommend checking out his stuff. Very good.
Appreciate it. Yeah, good to be here. Yeah, good to be on Eurovision.
Last time we had you on.
Yeah.
Last time we had you on, we talked about Korea for a bit, but you also told us you spent some time in Japan. So part of the show is going to be talking a bit about the Southeast Asia region again, some comparing and contrasting Korea and Japan on some of the same talking points. But we do have a bunch of other stuff we want to get through before that. Do you have anything you want to say, Nomad, before we get going on the other stuff?
No. Yeah, let's just start with the intro. The
news
weekend
roundup.
update.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Very good. So, let me just double check here. I'm going to just sort of speed through a couple of articles. A couple of weeks ago, I'm not sure if it was last week or whatever, we have been sort of keeping up to date with this youth party for the Communist Party having like a semi-coup in Norway, and the weird sort of radicals being put in charge. This woman, who's now the leader of the youth party, went on to a national radio show, which is like 15-minute politics thing, talking with the leader for the Labour Party, the Youth Labour Party, over a TikTok video she made. The Communist Party woman, she made a TikTok video calling our Prime Minister, the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, and Nikolai Tangen, the head of the Norwegian oil fund, terrorists on her TikTok. And apparently that was not a smart political move. So she had to try to defend herself, or let's rather say she didn't defend herself, and was instead saying that, this was a big mistake, I shouldn't have done this, etc., etc. What she's saying is that Norway has profited, I'm quoting here, Norway has profited from genocide in Gaza. We can actually do something about it. And I think it's too late to take responsibility. We're acting too slow. Nothing happens. You are just sitting and condemning, and you're speaking empty words. I don't think that's good enough. And that's all I wanted to shine a light on. Now, following this, let me just double up on another article here. She then ended up resigning from a local political office. Now, I'm trying to get a handle on this. Maybe you know, Path, but does this mean that she's still the leader of the party?
That's what I understood. She basically said that this the local office was just too much to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
With the other office. So yeah, I didn't take this as her resigning as far as her position in the youth party. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if you wanted to see clips of these TikToks, because I mean I linked them in the media channel. I wanted to display those TikToks on the last stream we did on this.
But I'll try to translate as best as we can. Which one would you like? The one where she rants about going to like political fundraisers?
Well,
or
they're both funny. She's just unhinged and screaming, so it's just good entertainment.
All right, let's start with the one where she. This is going to be a treat for all the Norwegians. You're going to have to live with.
Jag hatar network.
Okay, I don't like her voice, so I'm just gonna. You don't even have to listen to what she's saying, to be honest. You can just kind of see. This is like the crazy, Americans on Twitter have like the crazy women in the cars posting all sorts of unhinged stuff. This is the same type of energy, I feel. And someone's asking, is she a Turk? I think she's Iranian. Can you confirm that, Path?
I cannot.
You cannot.
I need to Google here.
She's brown.
I need some phrenology here, because there's so many people with that name. That's the problem.
Fair enough.
Here's extremely name in the non-West, let's say.
Here's this woman calling the Prime Minister a terrorist. I mean, she has that energy about her, right?
AOC energy.
I think, yes. I think her resigning from the local office is a bit of a, you call it like a smoke screen, I suppose. Like you'll basically fool some people into thinking that, well, she's resigned from some of her stuff, so she got some backlash enough to hurt her, right? But she's still exactly where she was in terms of power.
Yeah, maybe I'm not too down on the 4D chess angles with this. I'm inclined to just take it at face value that maybe she's just too stressed out.
That might be true.
She seems like slightly. It's the wrong type of person to have a political position, but I mean, if they're organized to some degree that we talked about last time, she has enough, let's just say, brown supporters who are orthodox Marxists in that party. But she's anti-Zionist, so I guess she's our girl, and since she's proper wifey material, and ready for some red peeling.
Well, I did, as I usually do whenever I read news, I head over to the Norwegian subreddit to see if I can find any comments on the articles, as I said, because basically comment sections aren't the thing anymore, not because I necessarily expect to find anything groundbreaking on Reddit. And this was the first thing I found. Now, this is, of course, in Norwegian, but it says I can fix her. So that's where we're at, honestly. Good luck, yeah. Get out the giant calipers, to do the phrenology, yeah. But I think someone says here, Henrik says, she was quickly cowed. I bet she will become the AOC of Norwegian politics. I wouldn't be surprised if she sort of has AOC as a bit of an idol, right? That she hopes that she can have some sort of similar trajectory. But we'll see.
Yeah, right. I'll believe it when I see it, to be honest. I don't know how much space they have for a character like that.
Now, of course, this has brought the Norwegian right on Twitter out in force to basically try to bully this woman into submission. And I see you've been clashing with a lot of Norwegian dissident right,
Well,
which as the saying goes, they aren't sending their best, right?
I mean, I try to interact because up until very recently, I've only interacted with sort of international accounts, people who are in the Anglosphere DR in the US or something. But I try to gradually just expand to find Norwegians that sort of are in their own bubble, talking about politics and seeing where they stand on this, and I just maybe asking some questions, interacting a little bit, and I mean, of course, like you said, some of what you'd consider the the counter jihad right has gone on to bully this woman, right? They've been very effective in just spreading these TikTok clips all around and just trying to push. But then we move even further right, and when we talked about the Norwegian far right political spectrum on the first episode of the Longhouse, and now we get to revisit some of those characters, because the party that's internationally called Alternative for Norway, or the Alliansen, like the head of that party came out basically in support of this woman, right? That's his take. Is that I don't know if you can share the tweet.
I can. Well, I will share it, albeit I'll be very explicit in that we here at the Longhouse do not share this guy's views, his unhinged assumptions, and we wholeheartedly support the nation of Israel. So
I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to share the picture or the tweet thread that
I'm going. You shared with me a picture of a tweet thread, so that's the best I got right now.
No. I think a little bit further down there's a link to.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
We could show the picture afterwards. It just
no,
wasn't.
I see. You're right.
Well done chronologically.
Here's the Twitter thread. Let me
Yep.
see if I can bring that up. Can I translate this?
I'm not sure you.
I'm not allowed to hit like the translate button.
No, I don't think you need to, but it's not controversial or sort of difficult to understand. It's the same sentiment that this woman said, that the terrorists, they're not called Ahmed or Ali or something, and they wear turbans. They wear a suit and tie, and they're called Jens Stoltenberg.
In the photo you sent to me, he also made a lot of allegations in regards to their heritage. Let's say that they all belong to a certain group. I had a lot of fun with the. Let's say I had a lot of fun with the name Stoltenberg in our chat.
Yeah, no, I mentioned this previously because I've been following this guy for a long time before he even got into politics, where he was sort of an Austrian economist, or like not.
Yeah,
I mean that makes it sound like he's
videos in his car. Yeah,
part of the Mises.
Like he was very like. He had the same MO as Stefan Molyneux for a long time. Like just driving around in his car talking about like Ayn Rand. Right?
Comes from that place, yeah. Or he's usually sitting on the beach. That's what I learned recently, that he apparently has some kind of issue, some kind of winter depression diagnosis, meaning that he can't be in Norway during the winters. That's why he's always in Spain for some reason. That seems to be kind of
tax money pays for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to say, like a lot of these, I see a common thread here. A lot of the people in Norwegian right-wing Twitter who are like really, really far right, they don't even live in Norway. They live in Spain.
They're
and they talk shit about Norway from Spain or Italy or something. They just don't like the colder climate. So he's usually on the beach when he's doing these videos. He was talking about Austrian economics in the beginning, then he went on to crypto, the sort of Ron Paul bros. And so he went into politics, and I think so sort of escalated under the lockdown period. And then after that, in my opinion, I think like the market for like a standard national conservative hardline party, it's already been taken by the Norway Democrats. That it's trying to sort of be a version of the Sweden Democrats, even though they're not even in parliament. But the sort of market share that he's trying to get into now is the kind of kook market, where you basically just go full Q-tard, C-tard, every kind of tard. I mean,
you adopt everything.
Yeah, you just
you
adopt
sent me a tweet about someone alleging that George Washington belonged to a certain heritage as well.
I mean, this is I don't know. I've been railing against the third worldists on Twitter, right? And here's a bit of the problem with not to make this into a big thing, but I mean, if you're using kind of clear them out as your, what do you call it, your heuristic or your sort of ontology as to how to approach politics, then you just, okay, whatever the elites or who you think the elites are, whatever position they take, then you just take the opposite position. And that's kind of, well, that's really, I mean, if you're not very sophisticated, then you end up with something like.
Can I try
this
to
guy's
be
doing.
a bit diplomatic here and say that there's a difference between taking the opposite position and always being against the regime? Do you understand what I'm saying? A lot of people make the error of always sort of taking the opposite position, whereas you can be nominally for clear them out without having to automatically take the opposite position on every issue. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that. But it seems to be at least a certain part of the, let's say, online right community that have the impression that if you're going to be dissident, that means you take the opposite position of whatever you think the regime is, even though there are multiple factions within the regime that have opposing views to each other. I mean, my view is that if you're going to have any sane approach to politics, you are going to have a view that will in some way align with one of these groups at some point. Like, I think it's just impossible to be a sane person and not have this. Otherwise, like I've made the point before, that if you don't have a view that aligns with one of these internal groups in the West, then you're basically sort of just aligning them with an external elite, like the Russian elite or the Chinese or something. And but that's sort of the MO of this guy. That's where you end up with this this kind of attitude where if the National Institute of Health, for example, said that you shouldn't eat poop, then he would just run to the bathroom with a spoon or something. It's I mean, like, I was watching his videos recently, and I mean, terminally online doesn't even begin to describe where this is going. Okay, this is where we are at. If I'm just going to go through the points, collapse imminent. Of course, that was the first point. It's going to be a collapse and a paradigm shift, and that, of course, we've heard that one. Collapse imminent. What's going to happen? Russia is going to become like the new world leading power. That was one of his points. He thinks that crypto is going to be the world standard. Israel is going to be destroyed. That was one of the points. Say so Holocaust revisionism is going to be mainstreamed, and like Christianity is going to be removed in the West to be replaced with some kind of Vedic paganism. That is kind of his position. I was trying to inquire him closer about this, right? And he basically said that, like, Snorre Sturlason,
He actually responded to you.
Yeah, he would have actually approved of. I made the point that, I mean, because there's like videos of this guy dancing around with Pajits, because he sort of sees himself as a spiritual leader in this kind of what do you call it, like the Vedas, the Hare Krishna movement. You can just look at their Wikipedia page to figure out what that is. But he's like dancing around with Pajits and saying that, like, this is some kind of great nationalistic, pro-white thing, because it's a living version of the Norwegian pagan tradition. So we have to ally yourself with Indians. And I sort of made a comment about this, and he claimed that, like, the original authors of these kind of the Voluspo and these texts actually would have approved of that. And I mean, there was no follow up on this.
Yeah,
but
he would have seen the Indians as brothers, because something Indo-Europeans, right?
that's the honest case that he made. It's like I just made the case that I'm going to, like, if you're taking this kind of hardline anti-Christian line, that's basically 1,000 years of Norwegian history that you're shitting on, right? And that's the. I mean, he goes very hard on this kind of I don't know what you want to call it, anti-Zionist stuff. And I've talked about this previously. You get to this kind of insane kind of Jew-brained vision of the world where can you share the picture there where he talks about the kind of Jewish links to Norwegian politicians? Yeah,
let's do that. I just need to save the photo real quick, and then I'll bring it up. Just give me a moment.
So the kind of Jew-brainedness, I think part of it comes from terminally online politics, of just kind of wanting to be an American, in spite of, like, thinking you love. There's a lot of this in, I don't know if you want to call it America envy or something. We have to find a name for this, where on one hand you hate America for being like the GAE and ruining the world with its geopolitical influence and so on. And on the other hand, you, like, all of the paradigms that you think about politics with are just intrinsically American and doesn't even function properly outside of America. So you're kind of trapped in this box where you on one hand you want to stop the American influence, but you're also perpetuating the American influence.
So just for everyone listening or who aren't Norwegian, he's implying stuff about the heritage about Benjamin Netanyahu, Stoltenberg, our Prime Minister Gahr Støre, and the former leader of what was she the leader of?
It's the Labour Party, yeah.
Yes, but she was in some international body as well, health organization.
Yeah,
he was like the secretary of the World Health Organization for a while, Brundtland. He's implying stuff about their heritage, saying that you should use your eyes with a picture of Jens Stoltenberg.
So
let me just real quick check. Like just
it's
other
not
photos.
true, like. I'm sorry.
Can we get an
using
early
your
light
eyes
check on this face? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've seen these sort of TV commercials for the eye doctors and so on, like with the guys who they step into the wrong classes or they go on the wrong flights or something. I mean, this could have been like an eye doctor ad for if you think that Jens Stoltenberg looks Jewish, you might want to get your eyes checked. Or something. He just makes these claims that Stoltenberg is Jewish, Jonas Gahr Støre is a Jesuit background, Erna Solberg is Jewish, like Gro Harlem Brundtland is Jewish, like works cited, and then it's just a crack pipe photo that's basically it doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense from this kind of terminally online, always America viewpoint, where at the same time it exists in the American paradigm, but you hate America as well. So it's I mean, I don't even know what more to say. It's just you can just sort of make assertions. It's like this kind of 60 IQ groypers that run around on Twitter saying you're Jewish if you counter signal them on anything at all. And that's sort of what they want the right wing to be now. It's just like you're just going to call people Jewish online, counter signal Zionism, and promote Russia and promote China in a sense. That's kind of what
throw him a bone here. I mean, if he made the argument that he might have been influenced by Jewish thought, he would have more ground to stand on, because I do believe that his dad spent a lot of time in like San Francisco and stuff like that, which I just assume if he's high class, he would have been, in circles. But that's the best stretch I can sort of figure out without someone showing me a link somewhere where it says that actually he is of certain heritage.
If you have if you take this kind of hardline pagan view that he does, then the argument then becomes Christianity itself is just a Jewish subversion, right? So like talk about the woke mind virus. They think that Christianity is like the Jewish mind virus, and that like 1,000 years of Norwegian history and everything cool that was done in that time was basically that it's the Jews that did that. Actually, it's not the white people, and that's kind of the view. I mean, that's sort of the Groyper view. And I linked you the photo with this other guy as well, who was claiming that the founding fathers of the U.S. were influenced by like Talmudic Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, or something like that. So even the founding of the United States is also a completely Jewish project, and it just borders on this like total mental retardation. I don't even know how much I need to go into this stuff, because there's enough.
My feed has been very funny this week. That's all, because of your fighting with these people.
Yeah, and they just it's like the people who watch Red Eyes TV that I try to argue with this kind of Jewish stuff, that they have to find some way to shoehorn this kind of Groyper worldview into, and I don't know why you would want to take like the lowest IQ kind of right-wing worldview and try to hammer that into local Scandinavian politics, but apparently that's the line that they're going to take. And everything is like you have maybe like 1,000 Jews in Norway or something, and they control every single thing that happens, and even I mean, it fits nicely now because the Eurovision contest is going on currently.
I think the octopus model is better to look at than trying to find sort of cell groups of certain people. But enough about that. Or maybe not, because maybe he's right, because they're having some hard time with Eurovision, right?
Currently,
as we all know, it starts with being thrown out of Eurovision, and then the rest of the world declares war on you, right?
Well, I mean, they would have been. There was talks about that they would be denied entry to Eurovision because they had a song that was political, right? And it's, I mean, Eurovision is supposed to be like a peacekeeping type of an arrangement where direct political messaging is not permitted. So what they did was that the Israelis changed their song and they were allowed to compete. They're allowed to use. I was watching Eurovision earlier today. I saw somebody using Israeli flags. Apparently they got that far, but it's being run out of Malmö, Sweden currently. There's many people coming in there, and I mean the Jewish crowds that are coming with like the Jewish competitors have just been advised to stay inside of their hotel rooms because there's like security concerns that they will be attacked. And there's I see from other sources as well, like there's a lot of Jews that are trying to just leave Malmö at this point because the agitation from these kind of pro-Palestine groups is so powerful at this point. So yeah, this is apparently, there's not a lot of advantages to being kind of the SOG ruling class in Scandinavia. Apparently, you don't even get basic protections. But
Malmo is the locality which has a high density of minorities and
it does, yeah,
Muslims and stuff as in Sweden. Yeah,
of course,
interesting place for
well, I mean, of course, you have to realize that it's larger, right? And there's a lot of satellite cities is usually where a lot of the activities is located. It's very, I don't know what gentrified or no, that's the wrong word, but it's sort of self-segregated in a sense in Sweden, where like you could have city centers or better places that are not just filled with these kind of like grenade tossing refugees.
Yeah, sure. It's the third biggest city in Sweden, isn't it? Behind Stockholm and Gothenburg.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Cyber Ninja Zero says AA himself just admitted that the JQ is the biggest part of American power. And for America, that might well be true, and it certainly trickles down to us. But you have to be careful not to get caught up. Like, the enemy of your enemy isn't necessarily a friend, right? You have to make sure that you don't end up allying with people who will just kill you or who are, low people of low character, just because it's a stab at someone you don't like.
Well,
I think that's all we're getting at.
I never try to make the point that like the American elite is not thoroughly Jewish at all. I'm just making the point that when you're looking at people, if you're going to make the claims that, let's say like this, people who are running politics in Scandinavia are Jewish, well, they aren't. I'm sorry, they just aren't. Yeah. It's hardly any of them there at all. So I mean, it just becomes like that. Like the tweet I just showed you, they're just making up lies at that point.
Anyway, so they're having a bit of trouble in Malmö, and I assume this is, you said, Nomad. This is something to do with the concentration of people who are pro-Palestinian in the area. It's we've covered this before as well when we did cover sort of the rise of anti-Semitism in Norway in the recent months, and the way this is being talked about, sort of the words they use sort of conjure up these images of like roaming skinheads, right? Trying to recreate the Crystal Knight. But whenever you see like actual reports, it seems to be much more just street fights between Palestinians and Jewish people.
Well, I mean, the far left has, kind of outflanked us on the JQ stuff at this point, right?
Weirdly enough, yeah.
There it goes back to the kind of AA points again. I mean, he was on Jay Burden not too long ago talking about this, and they mentioned me in that one. I mean, you talked to me, Walrus, that maybe I should go on Jay Burden to try to clarify what I mean by third worldist. But I mean, it does go into this, the thing, the sort of debate now is that how much of this kind of lefty talking points should we try to amplify on the right wing? That's kind of a discussion, and something that I'm talking about a lot on Twitter is the degree to certain factions within the right wing that their rhetoric now is just indistinguishable from the left. There's really almost nothing like aside from maybe some ideas attached to democracy or sort of Western liberalism that kind of differentiates them at all. I mean, if you look at, say, something like Nick Fuentes' feed or something recently, it's just kind of pro-Palestine stuff. That's all he gives a shit about. It's similar to, say, someone like Noam Chomsky, for example, or people who are sitting and simping for South African blacks or something. That's kind of what it is. And I think it's kind of sad that it's gotten like this, where people are just talking about the kind of right-wing Muslim-Christian alliances and this kind of nonsense that, I mean, there's plenty of criticisms that you could levy at Israel without needing to basically just adopt the entirely kind of leftist frame on this. But I mean, it's just the way it is now. I don't know. I don't know what more to make of it.
Yeah, I think from what I gather about the JQ is, like you said, the Red Ice TV crowd or the Groypers. You know, everything becomes about the JQ past a certain point in the sand. You know, and then they just don't stop. It's just, you know, one conspiracy after another, one narrative after another, and I don't know. I just find it gets very tiresome very quickly.
Well, I find it just tiresome in the sense that I feel it's hard to talk about this. In many ways, I feel like it's settled science. You know what I'm saying? It's like I gain nothing by arguing about the JQ online, honestly. So why would I, right? It's just there's nothing there. In terms of like, there's no discussion really to be had. We can try to out-baste each other, right, online, but that's not very productive, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't mean to go off on a separate point, but you know, we've had huge protests in London over this. I mean, arguably, must be some of the biggest, certainly in Europe, if not outside the Arab world. It's just a complete. It's all it is a complete sludge of, you know, groups from across the Islamic world. But of course, the ironic thing is that, you know, more and more of these Muslim countries are actually aligned with Israel as time kind of goes on. Saudi Arabia and whatnot, they have this, you know, admittedly very flimsy alliance. But they don't seem to, you know, bring that up in the thing. But
I've talked about
all kinds of lines, fissures. And...
Yeah, I've talked about this on Twitter a little bit. That I think maybe if things go on this way, that say at least the Democrats in the U.S. will have to take the Turkish or Russian approach to Israel and just constantly do pro-Palestinian signaling while at the same time maintaining trade relations with Israel. Because that's something that seems to work for them, right? But they have to, like Erdogan and Putin, there's constantly counter-signaling Israel and talking about Palestine. You have all these kind of pro-Russian propagandists. They're also doing a very like hard pro-Palestine line, but it doesn't change anything. The Russians maintain a good relation with Israel. Half of the oligarchs have like dual citizenship, and it seems to be ticking fine. But they have to, because of the Muslim population that is so large, they have to maintain. Oh, they did.
Apparently, Turkey cut trade relations this week. So
nothing happening, bros. Blown the fuck out. But I mean, at least up until this point, the Turkish line has just been talking about Israel and then doing nothing.
Right.
So
okay, it's been like 35 minutes, and this episode is called "The Longhouse on Japan." Is there anything else we want to sort of say to end this discussion?
I just wanted to make one quick point just to clarify my views on this. Is that I try to operate within a kind of framework with certain assumptions, right? And elite theory would be one of those things where you can use elite theory and just look at the groups who have power and have the ability to organize and then arrive at a certain JQ-ness. Or you could look at the ideas of multiculturalism and say that fundamentally multiculturalism creates friction. And different groups have different interests, and then there's to use that to explain the stuff that's happening. What I'm not so pro is like these kind of esotericists that you're seeing online. And the older I get, the less patience I have for philosophy in general. I'm really more interested in things like geography and economics, to be honest, to explain stuff. Because like the guy who talks about, well, here's like the secret Talmudic Kabbalah roots of George Washington, or the kind of Illuminati influences of this stuff, just gets absolutely insane talking to some of these people.
Tiresome.
So at some point, people who try to invoke the Talmud in general is something that I have little patience for. You could probably show me places in the Talmud that says bad things about non-Jews or whatever, but it's kind of not so relevant. With most of the people in that group don't even read this book in the first place. It's if it's not something that's actively engaged with, then it's not something that I'm really interested in considering as a part of a theory of like some kind of global overarching conspiracy view.
And then by that
group
time
dynamics are enough.
You're in the kook sphere, and everything is Talmudic or it's like those people who say you can explain human history from the hieroglyphics on the pyramids, like everything is mapped out there from mustache man right through to the wheel. Or it just, I've no time for them, like you said, Luddick, because you're just listening to an idiot, really. That's as simple as I can.
Sorry to say, but it's just to clarify. But so now we can do Korea and Japan.
All right. So I guess I'll start with because we have Nomad here who has some first-hand experiences. It's going to be like a huge deep dive on Japan, but we did talk a bit about Korea a couple of weeks ago, and it would be interesting to sort of have a bit of the same questions asked about a country like Japan.
Sure.
Like Korea, Japan is something that I don't really know much about other than, documentaries. I did do some research for this stream, tried to watch some documentaries on Japan that tries to not like hit the, when you watch like documentaries, usually like from the big places in like Tokyo, like the famous streets and all that stuff, but try to get like people who travel logs from people who have gone like outside the major metropolises to really get a feel for how badly they got hit by the sort of decline after the 80s boom. And I was surprised to find how many sort of like abandoned towns there essentially are in Japan. That was something I wasn't aware of. And I have read some sort of economic stuff related to Japan, so I'll try to chime in where I can. Other than that, it's, check out the old Longhouse anime episode. I guess that's the closest you can get for our takes on Japan. So, Nomad, why don't you sort of take it away, and I'll interrupt you or ask any questions as we go.
Sure. I mean, hopefully this will be a kind of probably a more natural, free-flowing stream, because we're going to sort of intersperse between my personal experiences and sort of any observations that anyone has about the East. But we had a good stream last month about declining birth rates, kind of focusing on Korea, and it went down really well. So we just decided to get together for another stream and maybe talk about issues to do with culture, society, politics, the economy, and the sort of differences between East and West. And I think we said separating myth from reality, and so that's it really. So I spent just over a year in Japan. I was an English teacher. This was quite a long time ago. I have to caveat that, gentlemen. Not sure if I put that in the notes. I was in a very
How long are we talking roughly? Just
I don't want to
10,
give away
20.
my age.
Okay, sure. Fair. Never mind.
No, sure, no. Yeah, it was 2009 that I went to Japan. I went to Japan.
Okay, so it's a while ago. Okay. Yeah.
It's a while ago, yeah. So I bounced from Japan to South Korea, where I spent a lot more time, like 7 to 8 years in Korea versus about a year and a half in Japan. I was in a small city called Hikone, which is so Japan is split into 4 main islands, right? So you've got Hokkaido at the north, Honshu, which is the big one, which has Tokyo, Osaka, all the big cities are there. And there's 2 smaller ones on the southern tip. Kyushu and Shikoku. So yeah, I was about just a couple of hours from Osaka. 1 hour if you get the express train. It's kind of quite near the coast. About 100,000 people. And yeah, so yeah, it was a mixed experience, Japan. I think I definitely learned a lot. It was kind of red pilling in a way, because in every respect, it's so different from the West, culturally, socially, politically, historically. A friend of mine has a good phrase that I remember, when you go out to the East, you forget everything you've learned, every premise about life, and then you start again. You're starting from zero again. And yeah, that's
this is maybe a big question, but
yeah,
was there a big gap in terms of like, because Japan is an island nation, right, who were isolated for quite a while. Is there a big gap sort of in the general culture between something like Korea and Japan in your experience?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, there's another saying that says that, basically Japan is pretty much 20, 30 years ahead of China and Korea because they see and how would I say this, becoming a developed nation much sooner than South Korea did. Much sooner. I mean, if you think in the 80s, I know, unfortunately, as always, I'm the most senior of us three on the stream, but I just about remember, even as an infant, just those news segments and things and the whole, the rise of Japan. Korea was still a dictatorship. They were still a dictatorship. They didn't have single voter democracy until the very early 90s. China was miles behind. They were still implementing Deng Xiaoping's reforms.
Right.
They were still transitioning to a more market-based economy. So Japan has always been ahead of the other, quote unquote, Asian tigers. But
then they also, as I said, had this crash sort of, or I guess crash is a bit harsh. This sort of decline in the, would you say, like the mid 90s?
Yeah, that was right in the late 80s. I mean, mid 90s. No, you're right. Yeah, that era basically. The bottom pretty much fell out of the Japanese economy.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for some of our younger viewers who might not know, Japan really accelerated in economic growth in the 80s. I mean, basically at one stage, small districts of Tokyo were worth in real estate value the whole of Manhattan, the whole of London. I mean, you couldn't get enough of Japanese investment and whatnot. Now, there's different reasons for this. We won't go into all of it. A lot of it is driven by really export surpluses, particularly in technological goods. If you think the old school television sets, the VCRs, literally
cameras,
all of those were Japanese. They were all Japanese. Panasonic, Sony, Mitsubishi. This is before the Koreans entered the market. Competition from Europe was not much less, and everybody wanted an old school hi-fi a VCR player. And I speak about this with a lot of people, but actually, relatively speaking, those goods were far more expensive back in those days relative to the purchasing power of the various currencies, whether it's a pound sterling, Norwegian krone, whether it's the dollar or whatever. Now that China is the manufacturing hub for the world, those consumer goods are a lot less. But anyway, not to digress, on the back of those huge export surpluses and, investments, anti-inflationary environment, low debt, Japan kind of almost flipped on itself, and a lot of those positive indices ended up being inverted. And, basically, they reached this point of stagflation.
But this was a demographic issue, right?
Yeah, this was motivated really by this plays into the demographic issue because their birth rate has always been so low. Now, Korea is, how do you say, as we'd say in the UK, hogging the headlines at the moment because they're at 0.72, whatever it is. But Japan has had this low birth rate for a longer period of time, if you know what I mean. So they've gone into this deflationary cycle where basically, there isn't enough consumption for all the goods and services because they're in net population decline. They have a rapidly aging society. So as we covered last time, they've got fewer taxpayers. They've got an elderly population that's, more of a burden on the state, requiring more medical assistance and welfare. So they've got, more people absorbing resources on that end of the scale. So, but
what
really,
I heard in the documentary was that Japan has sort of on scale the oldest population in the world.
Yes, they do.
At any
Yeah,
point,
and it's
yeah.
very visible, especially in Hikone where I was. It was basically a lot of old people, and then a lot of, not even a lot, but really my primary school or elementary school students. It's kind of funny. It is, it's this inverted population sort of pyramid, and unfortunately those problems were surfacing in the 90s, and they've really only gotten worse, unfortunately. So now Japan is heavily indebted. They have higher levels of both personal and public, private and public debt, along the lines of Western countries and whatnot. Admittedly, a lot of the debt is owned by the BOJ, the Bank of Japan, but there's still a lot of issues there. That's
this is. I'm going to try to get at a cultural question, I guess, through something I read on sort of Japanese business and banking, both. Because the way I understood it is that in business, I'm not sure if this is how it operates today, but culturally, their businesses tend to value tradition over profits, in a sense, doing things the quote unquote right way, or the way it's always been done, is better than experimenting. And in a sense, it's better to go down with the ship than betray, whatever the company used to be. Additionally, to add to sort of that understanding, I also heard of a lot of Japanese banks will more or less do takeovers of failing businesses to try to basically like get them back on track, where they'll insert board members from the bank until the company is profitable again, because losing that company sort of loses the bank face, right? If they lose that company in their portfolio, it's a sort of shameful display, as it were, for the bank.
Yeah.
So, how does that stuff play into other parts of Japanese culture? Can you talk about that?
I mean, I know a little bit about that, possibly not as much as I maybe should, but they do emphasize loyalty. They see the company as a family in a way, and when you enter one of these big companies, it's you're in this deferential, permanent, almost deferential position. They emphasize long-term employment, a sense of belonging, really, and broadly, and even beyond that, they encourage their employees to invest in the company's objectives, buy shares and whatnot. And it's an interesting kind of the commitment is much more than just employment, but it is very much culturally based. There's no frame of reference for it in the West. I don't know. It's something I've never really kind of got my head around. Japanese corporate culture, Korean as well, is very competitive. And there's a blurring of the lines, and we're going to probably see this a lot during this stream, but between culture and law, whereas in Western countries, it's much more defined, where one starts and the other ends. In Japan, in Korea, it's, you know, there's a lot
The
more
norms
gray
have a
areas.
much bigger power. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
The societal norms, yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and there's a way in which this kind of, I don't know, it's kind of informs everything. Like you said, yeah, culture, society, business. They, you know, they have this sort of they have
Is
these
it
that
that
run
all of these
throughout.
aspects of life is more intertwined than, you know, we talk a lot these days about the work-life balance, right? Would you say that this goes for both Korea and Japan, I guess, that there's a much more like connection between who you are and what you do in that sense?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, it's kind of funny because the obligations you have go beyond the desk and beyond the boardroom. Like in Japan and Korea, in the companies, they socialize with each other. You know, they go for drinks, they go for meals. In Korean, it's called hweshik. In Japanese, I don't know what it is, but you know, you're expected to. You can't be an outcast. You can't say, "Oh, sorry, I've got some engagement. I'm not going to come," because if you do that, you're going to be ostracized. They'll see you as the other, quote unquote. This, you know, bleeds out into other things. For example, if somebody's getting married, they're expected to give out invitations to at least their immediate team and whatnot. If somebody in their family dies, everybody's supposed to give an offering of condolence and whatnot. If
Oh,
somebody's
wow.
giving birth, that's another thing. Your obligations never stop. It can get a
Interesting.
little bit. It's really, I don't know. When my experience of it, like it gets a little bit annoying if I'm being quite.
No,
Um,
I understand,
honest.
because I feel like what you're describing there is sort of the what I would assume from my cultural perspective is a much more free flowing social contract, as it were, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
and as a Westerner who's steeped in kind of liberal values, and I think we
uh,
all are, even if we're a
no,
product
no,
of it.
understandably,
Even
yeah.
if we take opposition to it, and in our spheres, we're constantly, you know, this question just hangs over us permanently. You know, it doesn't matter what level, even for the Nats, you know, whether it's the more harder nationalists, whether it's the reactionary sphere, we're always toying with the idea of liberalism. And when I was in the East, I'm like, there's things I love about Japan, things I love about Korea, but there's also things I will never,
Yeah,
never reconcile. Like
how
I'll
much
never.
of your obligations or of your sort of uh connections or social bonds would you be willing to sort of like systematize, I suppose, right? Or
Yeah,
enshrine in some sort of law,
yeah,
even if it's unspoken, right?
yeah, absolutely. Good question. I mean, for my, like, because I was an English teacher all along, for my immediate co-workers in the English department, I would always do my best. And I've got to be honest, especially like they know you're a foreigner, you're from a different country, you're a different culture. You're not going to know all of this stuff immediately, and they're not always going to expect you to do, you know, to perform
The
the
proper
rites and
thing.
things like.
Yeah.
The thing that gets me, like some of my schools have been a bit different, but you know, there's a year two teacher who I never see, and I don't teach their kids. Like, do I have to give 20 US bucks because her grandmother passed away? I'm like, I'm sorry, because obviously the obvious question is, if you bring that to its logical conclusion, well, every month somebody's going to get married or have a
Mm.
kid, or not, maybe not literally, but you know, this gets a bit silly. And I don't know, I actually used to put my foot down a lot. Like there's way more obligations in the East than there are in Western countries, and when they mess with Nomad's money, that's a line in the sand for me. So I don't really know. But if there's like a trip and they're going to see the flower blossoms, which they always do, or they're going to visit a temple, if they're going to go for a meal, I would always go. I would try to go with them, but a lot of the time,
Sure. But I mean,
when I was
you
a
can
normie,
say that's like team building, basically, right? Getting to know your coworkers.
Yeah, I remember when I was a normie cuck before I read, I found Sargon and Curtis and all the other radical races. Like, I think it was the Avengers film, and I think I reserved tickets. Sorry,
okay. Yeah, I
a
would
bit
probably
of a
turn that
reveal.
down.
I was like, I don't want to go to your stupid park. I want to watch Goyslop from Hollywood. And
you stayed home to watch the Goyslav. Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, the West is the best. And
the problem is that every weeb in this chat who's listening to this would probably rather watch what is it? Is it cherry trees blossom? Because that's like the one thing, like the big tourist attraction in Japan, isn't it?
Yeah, those are really nice. Yeah, they're in Korea and Japan, and I'm actually quite a budding photographer. No pun intended.
Right.
So yeah, I would often go, and there's great scenery. I mean, they have 4 distinct seasons in that part of the world. The Japanese landscape is very, very nice. It's very beautiful. Mount Kita, Mount Fuji, obviously, is the lasting, enduring symbol of Japan, and it is very nice. I've seen it in different seasons, and it's beautiful. I mean, I must say they do like the Nordic countries. I mean, they do like the Northern Lights and stuff. Some of my co-workers went and saw that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The thing is with the Japanese, I mean, look, let's be a bit honest and a bit un-PC. They're kind of rich, to be honest. They're the boomers are effing rich. I mean, they've got money to burn. Don't also remember Japanese goods cost a lot less in Japan than they do in our countries. So
understandable, yeah.
They will often, and also in that part of the world, overseas travel, particularly in Europe and America and Australia, is seen as a flex, as a sign of good upbringing, of wealth, of prosperity, and things like that. So they're keen to there's that component. It's kind of weird. I mean, no pun intended. It's kind of a yin and a yang. One thing we'll get into, nationalism is really entrenched in both those countries, but they also like foreign stuff. They like foreign goods, foreign travel. They like foreign culture, but they just don't like foreign people very much. That's the flip side. But going off on all kinds of tangents. I mean,
I did see. You mentioned the islands. I did see some. In one of the documentaries I watched, I did see some footage from the northern part. And I mean, I can understand if you're like big on, winter activities, you would like to go to the Nordics to sort of, there's similarities in nature there, right?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the north gets really cold. I mean, I never went to Hokkaido, which is because it's more northern, so it's very cold. I mean, that's touching Russia. That they have maritime borders with Russia.
Yeah,
it's so close. It gets pretty cold, to be honest with you, man. And I was quite by the coast, so it was.
That must be frigid. Yeah.
I mean, I think
sea winds. Yeah.
I mean, there are the minus temperatures January and February, maybe December to February, but I guess it would be on par with Norway. It's definitely colder than the UK. But yeah, the extremes are difficult to deal with. And of course, in the summer, it gets like, I mean, you're easily in the 30s, you get drenched with sweat when you just go out to buy a few things really from the convenience store. So you get all the
Right.
extremes, and the UK's a bit more temperate. We don't have those extremes in climate. So
Yeah, but it's
yeah,
raining
I
all the
guess
time over there.
yeah, well, yeah, that's it. I'm just going to share an article in the chat about Japanese
Sure.
business culture. Now, it is enemy territory from LinkedIn. I know I don't like LinkedIn, but yeah, this is a good one. This is one of the best ones because I wrote something about this recently.
I
But
don't usually, I mean, if you have a more modern job, you usually have to have LinkedIn, of course. So I do
yeah.
have it. I don't use it very often,
Oh,
but
it's
I
it's
got a
it's
notification.
worse.
Every couple of weeks I'll get a notification because some recruiter, wants to talk to me. So I go into LinkedIn, and there's this
Yeah,
new feature on LinkedIn, which is, like LinkedIn, I believe, can just like pose a question to like the entire community, and depending on like what you've tagged yourself as, like what is your field, you will sort of get that question in your feed, right? And it's usually very simple questions about what you're doing, right? So let's say there's like, what's the benefits? It's something's really stupid. Like for anyone who works with with that thing, it's a very simple, like like JavaScript 101 question, right?
yeah,
And you get those like reams and reams of Indians and people who use who I assume use like something like Chat GPT to answer these questions, just clogging up the replies of LinkedIn. And I'm not really sure what the feature is for, because it's literally just a river of shit, right?
yeah.
on the
It's
feed.
I don't like LinkedIn. It's all virtue signaling and 10 ways to streamline
Yeah,
efficiency and productivity for a better. I don't know. Just there's a certain type of person that uses LinkedIn that I don't
there really
jive on.
is. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, there's the culture. The thing is, what I'd say about the culture more broadly is you kind of learn on the bounce, and the longer you stay, the more you learn. But I don't think you ever stop learning. But Korea was a bit different because my Korean is actually quite good, if I may say so. I'm kind of intermediate. I'm level 4 out of level 6 in the Korean exam, and I was in Korea for much longer, and that changes your appreciation and understanding of everything, really, everything that's around you, your working day, the culture, the history, and whereas with Japanese, I never really got to that level, if I'm being
The
honest with
history.
you.
Yeah.
With the
Oh,
language, sorry, with the
oh,
language,
sorry,
yeah,
the language. Okay, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean,
But
you lived longer in Korea, so that makes sense. So we talked a bit about culture. You mentioned politics. We've been touching on it. But what I want to cover, which we did talk about it with Korea as
sure,
well, is um, well, what's the high level status of Japanese politics from what you remember? Nothing,
sure.
you don't have to go deep.
Yeah,
And sort of what two things, I guess. It's the fertility rate, which seems to come up again and again in the news, or I guess like the gender relations, because it
yeah,
seems to go deeper than just people aren't having babies. It seems that, you know, people aren't interacting the
yeah.
way they
This is
used to.
it. It's very concerning. I mean, okay, so politically, I think it's hard. I think generally speaking, politics is very it's very different. I mean, for a start, a lot of the culture wars, they just don't exist because they just don't have the same push and pull forces, whether it's immigration, diversity, or anything like that. So there's none of that. Um, a lot is dominated by the economy and whatnot, and increasingly geopolitics, because of course, what has happened is that China has really grown in strength, grown in power, and they've basically caused this shift of the geopolitical paradigm, really on the back of their bilateral relationship with the United States and trade and economic ties in that sense. So that is something that lurks kind of in the region. Of course, there is also the other problem of North Korea, which is a pariah kind of.
How's their relations with China?
Yeah, I think not. Not very good, because during during the Japanese imperial reign, there were many atrocities committed by Japan, actually really all across the region.
They got up to some, they did a couple of vibe checks, as the Gen Z calls it.
I mean, you're talking from the tip, really, from Burma, Myanmar, right through to China. All those countries, the Japanese were involved with on some level. Now, Korea, it was much more serious, because they basically, Korea was a colony of Japan, really, right up until the end of the Second World War, to be honest with you. And in the first half of the 20th century, there were lots of atrocities. In China, they remember the siege of Nanking and things. And in Korea, there's a lot of issues that remain. There's a lot of issues there. So, I mean, tensions are always there. They're always on the surface. They sometimes boil over, but the balance of power there is a lot different. Japan has committed itself to a policy of peace and non-alignment since World War II, because of a lot of the atrocities that were committed by Japanese in World War II and before. But of course, the problem is they've got two nuclear powers on their doorstep. Three nuclear powers.
Yeah.
They've got North Korea, they've got China, they've got Russia as well. I think it's particularly difficult for South Korea, because South Korea has never been a great imperial power, whereas they're surrounded from side to side by superpowers, the Japanese, China, Russia, and a hostile actor in North Korea. So it's interesting. I didn't really, I never really delved into it that much when I was there, either in the English language news or whatever. I find, generally speaking, guys, that they tend to be not very political outwardly, Koreans and Japanese. They're just not. I don't know. I think they're so weighed down by industrial life and modernity. Similar but different to the way we are. There are some similarities that
do you think that's part of? I mean, I feel like whenever you look into history of Southeast Asia, I mean, this seems like almost their mode of being, right? They've always been incredibly hierarchical. And even though they might be a democracy now, it's pretty much business as usual. Like, people don't really feel like they have any say, or shouldn't have any say, in politics.
Right, that's absolutely right. I mean, as I say, remember what I said about 20 minutes ago. I mean, in South Korea's case, the Ninja Turtles are older than democracy. In South Korea's case, they didn't know democracy until the 90s. It was basically the 1988 Seoul Olympics, which forced them to become more open. And really, when their economy grew, they had to build more ties with the outside world. And of course, another big actor in all of this is the United States, States of America, because after World War II, and I think we mentioned this before, they had a separate plan for reconstruction, redevelopment, the Dodge plan. So that was very instrumental as well, because basically what it meant was that America had the same interests in that part of the world for industrial redevelopment, rebuilding their economies, as they had in Europe. And those countries are also, to some degree, very loyal vassal states of the broader American empire. America has bases all over basically the whole island of Okinawa is just US military. America's biggest military base in the world is in South Korea. Is just south of Seoul, about 50 kilometers, and it's huge. It's basically like a small town. To be honest with you, it's massive, and it's ringed by about 2 kilometers of just empty space. If you think like Area 51 kind of thing, and they've been there since World War II. Now, is it to deter North Korea, Chinese aggression in the Pacific with Taiwan? Who's to say? Who can really say? I think they have numerous objectives, but yeah, they've always been alongside America. I mean, Japan is the biggest holder of US treasuries, US debt securities. That is a big part of their bilateral relationship. China is number two. South Korea is a very loyal sort of vassal state to America, an ally. So, and this is the reason this influences, because one theory people have put out there, guys, is that the reason for North Korea is that China wants a hard border between themselves and one of a country that's in the American Imperium. Do you see what I mean? So they don't want to.
They're fine with North Korea just continuing to exist.
Exactly. They want to be. They don't want a deferential position to any country that they have a hard border with. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. The two big exceptions would be India and Russia, because obviously they have a bit more geopolitical strength and whatnot. And there's different kind of different kind of geopolitical alignment. So it's very complicated in Asia, and economic. The extent to which they're integrated and tied together economically complicates things, even further. So there's a lot of push and pull factors in that vicinity. Yeah.
All right. Well, in the notes you showed me earlier, I'm not sure if this is relevant. You have written oikophobia, Roger Scruton.
I think that was another article, actually. That's another Nomad article. Yeah, if you follow me on Patreon and subscribe. I'm joking. Okay, yeah. I mean, what I wanted to say was I wanted to get a balance between. See, a lot of people ask me, like, "Oh, Nomad, you talk about Japan and Korea in your writing. It never comes up. It doesn't come up on the streams until now, until this one." And I don't know where to go. I don't want to constantly say, "Oh, well, things are better over here. Things are better over in foreign lands," because I don't think that would go down well in our circles, to be honest. But it depends. I think people get it. But I mean, I think to some degree, what I wanted to get at is that those countries have benefited from the push towards liberalism, because there's a certain type of person that gets attracted to life overseas. They're very liberal. They have a strong outgroup preference. They like fluffy liberalism. They like the liberalism that fits on their Instagram feed and their social media profiles. They like wearing the kimono, the sushi, as somebody said in the chat. They like doing all the cliche things, but they're often very liberal about foreign countries, but then they take a different perspective when it comes to the West, and that kind of annoys me as well. But there's all kinds of cultural dynamics that come into play, especially if you're an expatriate and things, and it's quite hard, because I mean, obviously, another thing I put there is one of the defining characteristics, and we've talked about immigration a little bit, is they're very homogenous. Like they're very ethnocentric. They have a strong in-group preference. They have a very low, very weak out-group kind of preference. I find in Japan and Korea, they're very contractual with how they see relationships. a lot of it is about what you're getting and what you're receiving. It's just not like the West, really. And I think that informs, like, their immigration policies and whatnot, because it's very different. Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, we talked a bit about it earlier, of course, with the obligations, etc. But is it the fact that it's kind of like sort of formalized that's kind of throwing us as Westerners off?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, let's just be a bit honest here. I mean, Korea and Japan, they have immigration policies that are racial in intent, whether they say so or otherwise. It's very difficult to immigrate outright to either country. It's basically impossible if you don't have a spouse, to be honest with you.
Right.
It's like, how do I say? I often say, it's very easy to go there, but it's very difficult to stay there, if you like.
Make friends, I guess, and yeah.
Exactly, yeah, because it is all different, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say, they can often seem quite unwelcoming, and how do I say, very a lot of it is informed by tradition and culture. Obviously, Confucianism is a big component of that throughout the region, which emphasizes hierarchy, group think. Group think is a very big thing. And of course, as a foreigner, you're never going to be within the group. You're always going to be outside on the periphery. You're always going to be the other. I kind of I felt that Korea was always a little bit more welcoming, but that's because I picked up the language, and that helps a lot. It definitely helps. If you can speak Japanese, you'll always be better accepted. You speak Korean, you're going to be sorry about that. You're always going to be better accepted by the people. The problem is you get people that come from the West and they don't know, they've ended up in that part of the world, but they don't make the effort to learn. And that's problematic, because they're never going to adjust better and whatnot. But it's a constant, this is why they don't, like I said to you on the last stream, there is no Korean dream. Like when you think about the prospects there and the cost of living, rising property prices, low birth rate. I mean, it's very difficult, and I think it's similar for Japan, really. I mean, they have enough problems with diaspora Japanese, diaspora Koreans who come over and want to integrate, as much as like actual foreigners who look differently, to be honest with you. But maybe there's going to be a change. I don't know. I'm really torn on this, to be honest, guys, in the chat, because obviously we rally against the forces of progressivism and mass immigration, diversity, DEI, multiculturalism. But at the same time, I always wish they'd be a bit more open in those countries in the Far East, but you can't have it both ways, I suppose. You can't. But there's just no happy middle ground. I don't know. It's difficult, and I don't know.
I understand. Yeah,
it's a difficult one. You'll never, like I said, there's things I'll never reconcile, and you're never sure if things just happen because they do, or because you're a foreigner. Do you know what I mean? You're like,
yeah.
Oh, what did that happen? Why did he give me that look? Or why did I miss the bus because I'm a foreigner and the bus driver just took off? Or, have I got the same amount of meat in my donburi as the person next to me? Was I overcharged? Was I undercharged? But I mean, it's.
But I mean, that's in theory issues for anyone, emigrating to another country. It's difficult, right? It shouldn't really do it because it's easy, or to put it another way, it's got to suck really bad where you are to want to do it, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, people always say that when you go over, there's this honeymoon period. Everything's new, everything's exotic. You try lots of new things. You go to interesting places. You sample the culture, the food, and that's true. Yeah, there is that. But
at that point, it's just kind of like an extended vacation, right?
Exactly. But then after that period is finished, then reality sets in, and it's like there's a different process for everything in the Far East. You want to go to a doctor, you download an app, you online shopping, you name it. There's a different way. Like even eating, in Japan, you have to buy a token, and you order digitally. That's more common in the West, but that's been around in Japan, a lot earlier. There's all kinds of things. And the problem is, if you struggle with the language, you're just going to struggle to adapt. Everything from crosswalks to everything is just different, and you have to learn all these things again. And it can get quite mentally taxing, mentally exhausting. Now, that being said, it's a lot different now with the advent of, I don't want to sound old, but the advent of the internet. You've got Reddit, you've got Facebook groups, you've got avenues to post your problems or questions. Yeah, find people. But yeah, it's kind of always a challenge. I mean, I was always okay in Korea, to be honest. Things do get a bit frustrating, but maybe they'll always be there. But yeah, it depends what you're talking about as well. I don't want to generalize too much, but a lot of luxuries and conveniences from the West, they're not there. They have very protectionist economies. They want local manufacturers making everything from bridges and airplanes right through to chocolate and confectionery. So there's no Nestle, there's no Cadbury's, there's no Mondelez, there's no big Western corporations, because the Japanese,
but they seem to be willing to pay for that, right?
Yeah, they figured out
social sense and the and the consumer sense, right?
Yeah, they figured out very early on that if you let these big Western, particularly American companies into your market, they're going to overwhelm the domestic market, domestic manufacturers and suppliers, and they're just going to be buying everything. They're just going to be buying everything up. So they try to be as self-sufficient as possible. I didn't understand that when I first went there, to be honest, Wars, but I do understand that now. But yeah, it's kind of funny. There's hardly any UK stuff in Korea and Japan. There's more American stuff because America forces people to have free trade agreements for their goods and capital to roam freely, because that's what happens when you're the hegemonic power and you circulate the world reserve currency. But for the UK, it was always hard. Like, I would always get Yorkshire tea sent over, or my mum would send it over, and they would always stop it at Osaka Airport or Incheon. It was always really annoying. But
held in customs, yeah.
Held in customs. But now even the thing is, Koreans, Japanese, they travel more. So there's a lot of domestic demand for foreign goods, to be honest, across the board, whether that's wine, whether it's cheese, whether it's chocolate and things like that, whether it's products, brands, labels, clothing. So across, in many respects. But I don't know, yeah. I've seen a lot of changes in the time.
Sure.
I've been there. Like in Korea, the iPhone sells more than the Samsung made smartphone, for example. Now, if you just said that when I first went there, I wouldn't have believed you. It's interesting. Yeah, how the culture impacts. The culture and society impacts the economy and the people and things. It is quite interesting, I think.
All right, very good. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I want to get through a couple of chats here that caught my eye. First of all, Burkarl used one of his member posts to write, and I had to translate this: Moomin is the best anime.
Yeah, they really like Moomin in Korea. They really like Moomin. Like I'd say 1 in 5 of my students had a Moomin thing, and they like Angry Birds as well. Is that Norwegian or is that Swedish?
I don't think Angry Birds is any. Is it? Hang on. Let me check. Angry. It's Finnish. I had no idea. Okay. Well,
it is Finnish. Yeah.
More you know, it's Finnish. Yeah.
But the thing is, they have this kind of inferiority, superiority complex with the West, because it wasn't until I went to ESO I was like, oh God, they really respect like Europe, America, and things like that, their achievements and things, and in a way they're happy with their own cultural imprint, but there'll always be that tinge of jealousy and things, in my opinion. But that,
of course,
that's just that's another can of worms, to be honest. But
right,
yeah, like Japan, they really like classical music. They will pay many time multiples for the various Austrian, German philharmonic orchestras to come over, the Russian ones, and they have their own composers as well, too. And that's just one thing. Korea's done very well with sport and things. They've got footballers in Europe. They've got baseball players in the MLB. I know that sounds very normy, but to those countries that does mean a lot, because
you're participating in the same thing. I understand it.
That's a certificate of that's a gold standard that says to them that they've made it. It's a bit like Yao Ming, the basketball player who's at the Houston Rockets and things, a Chinese one. These are like levels of achievement that we just take for granted. We don't see it like that. We don't even care. I mean, if Europeans go to the NBA, Dirk Nowitzki wins the MVP for the San Antonio Spurs. Nobody in Germany, they don't throw like a party or anything. But in Korea, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's kind of that nationalist fervor. When they succeed, they're entertainers, they're sports stars. It's like the country succeeds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like they're marketing their country in a sense. I understand.
Things. If you say to a Norwegian, Erling Haaland, they'll just look at you and go, no, I don't care about that. Why are you talking to me? If you say to a Brit...
Well, Norwegians do have a bit of that in them too, so we might actually do the same thing.
Maybe it's just the Anglosphere that's just grumpy, old, miserable, and conservative.
It's the Ngubu thing, I think, but Norwegians get quite interested in, like you say, like with Magnus Carlsen, like all of the Norwegians were chess experts, I think, at one point.
Magnus
Carlsen. We have our top guy in chess, then we all have to get into chess for like 2 years. Yeah.
So if we have one top guy, if it's some obscure sport like curling or something, then everybody gets into that. So there is some nationalistic sentiment, and pride to it.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, you see, of course, in Japan they have their own. They have sumo. They have aikido. Obviously, they have karate as well. But unfortunately, they're dying out. And of course, Korea has the big one. They have is of course taekwondo. They have
the bamboo sword thing as well. Isn't that big in Korea? Like you put on the armor and you...
they do. I forgot that one.
I forget what it's called.
I first went to Korea because of an interest in taekwondo. Unfortunately, because of knee injury, I don't practice it anymore, and probably age as well. But that's another big cultural export. Of course, a big one from Japan would probably be on video games and Nintendo.
The biggest from Korea, I think, is StarCraft, isn't it?
Online gaming is massive there. Like, it's so autistic. They're just a nation of 50% autists who just, if you ask any Korean student what their hobby is, it's just play computer games. That's all they do apart from study, is play computer games. And I'm not really big into video games, but same thing with Japan as well. Like, I would go to the arcades and I would play. Do you know Tekken? Remember Tekken? That game, the combat game.
Yeah, it's still it's on its 8th iteration or something. I mean, it's still like the biggest fighting game.
Yeah, you see, I'm a bit old school when it comes to video games, so I would play those in the arcades, and you'd get like a 9-year-old who hands you your backside into 2 wins, and then I quickly quickly went out of that. But yeah,
Right.
but it's also big.
Someone commented it's kendo. That was the thing I was thinking about. Yep. Okay, so next super chat here is 100 Norwegian kroner from Roger Scruton, the man himself.
There he is.
Did you see the news about a conservative conference in Oslo? The paper Dagen covered it. Positive development of this and right in Norway? ? I saw the article, and I've seen a couple of other conferences as well. But all of the things I could find earlier was behind paywall when I read it. So I've heard about it. I don't know anything about it. So,
I saw the article as well. I saw the it was behind the paywall, but I could just see the photo and infer the people who were involved.
Toya
But, I
was
mean,
there. It's supposed to be there. Yeah.
It's something I like, but it's very much I think within inside of the Overton window or good optics. It is not dissident. It's not like the this kind of anti-vax pro-Russia conference. It's probably just talking about like general conservative attitudes and trying to get more right-leaning people into universities and stuff like that. It's not explicitly dissident in any way. I think. I mean, of course, the people who are involved might be in touch with multiple spheres, but at least outwardly, it's not. It's not something that's a threat to the system.
No, we'll see. Maybe something will happen. Okay, I think that's it. An hour and a half. It's time to round off. Thank you so much for joining us, Nomad.
Thanks for having me.
It's great talking with someone who has boots on the ground experience for when it comes to this.
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit difficult. I mean, you don't know where to really start and where to. I was a bit like before the show. I was a bit more anxious actually, but it went well. It flowed well, and yeah, we covered a lot. There's a lot more that could be said, of course. But yeah, that was a good,
I mean, my plan now is that I'm gonna go away from this. For those in the chat, I'm gonna go away and give me a year. I'm gonna play all of the Yakuza games, and then we'll come back and we'll do another episode based solely on my research playing those games. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Because I'm sure that tells me, gives me a proper indication of what life in Japan is like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, better than sumo wrestling.
Yes, exactly. Of course, in the description down below is the link to Nomad's Twitter and his Substack, so check those out if you would like. Ludwig Path, do you have anything you want to inform the people of?
Yeah, just the usual. Follow me on Twitter and subscribe on praxarchy.com.
Very good. You can follow me on Twitter as well, where I usually just hit post a bit more. Ludwig Path is a lot better at engaging in philosophical debate, as it were, with other people. I'm only on Twitter to have fun these days, it seems. There's also next week on the slot, we have a talk with Call of the Shield Maiden about the Corncrake magazine, and of course, a little bit about her, which I'm looking forward to. And the week after that, I'm still looking into, I want to do a retouch on sort of young people and mental health, because there's some more articles and reports that have come out about that. Would be interesting to have another look. So we'll see how that shakes out. All right. Anything else you want to say before we leave?
No, just thanks for having me on again. It's, probably one of my favorite shows in the DR, so always a pleasure.
That's
always
good to hear.
Thanks for promoting my work. Yeah, let's touch base again next month or whenever. And yeah,
thank you for coming on, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.
Right?